my initial reaction is to not try and sell a Canadian ice in winter as long as they have ice, right? So I have an ethos, especially in B2B sales, that you shouldn't sell to everyone. Not everyone is a fit. And really what you should be looking for is people who have a very specific set of problems that you can help solve. Because if you try and sell to everyone and you go way too broad, your messaging gets really kind of wishy-washy. And ultimately you won't close sales. You'll have more sales end in no decision because those people don't have a compelling reason for change. So for the most part, a lot of Canadians might not have a need for ice in the winter because, believe it or not, it's really cold where I live and there's a lot of ice around. Less now than there was a few years ago, global warming, let's not get onto that. But I would be specifically looking for a list of questions. I would be asking them questions to try and figure out if they really do have ice. Because I also don't want to just assume they've got it covered, right? Because let's be honest, even if it is really cold in Canada, maybe they don't want to be eating ice from the street. Maybe their freezer's broken. So I would be asking questions like, hey, Canadian person, let's call you Zach, because I know a Canadian called Zach. First of all, I'd try and get some context. Do you even use ice at the moment? Do you use ice in your drinks? How are you currently using ice, if at all? Do you freeze your food? Do you include ice in your drinks? Yes. Okay, well, how are you currently doing that today? And they might go, well, I have a freezer. Well, tell me more about that. Like, well, typically with my freezer, I'll put in some trays of water. And I'm like, okay, interesting. So how often do you have to refill those trays? And what I'm starting to do by asking those questions is paint a picture of how they're doing things today and if they're doing them well. And if I hear, oh, I'm using ice trays and I'm refilling them in the sink and putting them in my freezer every day, well, then that means I can then say, okay, well, what happens when you forget to fill the ice tray? I don't have any ice. That must be frustrating. Tell me more about that. And I can start to create this gap, this problem that Zach wasn't thinking about. And that's that he forgets to sometimes refill the ice tray. His wife comes downstairs to make a nice glass of water. That creates tension in their relationship because she asked him to refill the ice tray. He didn't, and he forgot again. He said he would. And all of a sudden, we've got this huge emotional gap that can be filled by my ice, my product, because of the questions I'm asking him. So I wouldn't talk about the ice, basically. I would ask him about his use for ices, if he uses ice, how he does that today. And then ideally find a problem. If I didn't find a problem, if I found that Zach has the best ice machine on the planet and his wife is so happy with how much ice is in their household and it's never broken, great, that's awesome. I don't suppose you would know anyone who maybe doesn't have as good of an ice hookup as you, Zach. And then I'd get a referral from them and actually find someone I could help. One of my first ever sales jobs was in Australia and I was selling what was pretty much a scam. I wasn't aware at the time, but I became aware and I left soon after. But a lot of the time, luckily I met my wife for that job, so it was all worth it in the end, right? Although I was only there for 2 months, met my missus, now I have 2 kids, and I live in Canada, right? Now, at the time, the way I was calling these people was going onto the yellow pages, finding small business owners who I felt like I could help or who looked like a good fit, and then I was just calling straight down the numbers. And it was really the first time I've been in Australia. And now, for those of the who haven't been to Australia or don't know that many Australians, they're very good with their profanity. I've been called every word under the sun by, Aussies in, out in the outback who I've called, be like, hey, spotted your business on Google. I'm curious, would you like to take a look at how you get found by more people in SEO? And they'll, tear one strip up the other side of you and one strip down the other side. Now, that's to be expected, but you get called a lot of random words that you never even heard of, especially when you're new to a country. I very quickly picked up on the slang. But the one that sticks with me wasn't that. It was actually in America. I was calling sales leaders. So you'd imagine sales leaders typically would have a bit more empathy for a cold call, right? And I called this person, and sometimes when you're calling, you're a little bit zoned out, maybe doing some notes in Salesforce or whatever it may be. And I called someone, and they picked up the phone, and I was kind of like, oh, crap, I got someone. So I said, oh, hey, Jeff, how are you today? He was like, yeah, I'm good. Who's this? And I was like, it's Will Aitken here from Proposal Guide, where I was working at the time. Just spotted that you're currently hiring folks on LinkedIn. I'm curious, as your team grows, how are you avoiding this problem? And he went, sorry, is this a cold call? I was like, yeah, it is. Yeah, sorry, my bad, Jeff. Yeah, sorry, Will Aitken from Proposal Guide is a cold call. He said, why are you pretending that you know me? I'm like, excuse me? He's like, well, you said, how have you been? That suggests that we've spoken before. And I was like, even in my kind of like surprised moment, I was like, I'm pretty sure I didn't say that. So I was like, I'm not sure I did. I said, how are you? Granted, not the best opener, Jeff. I'm sure, salesperson. can we start again maybe? And he said, no, you did pretend you knew me, yada, yada, yada. And he kind of like gave me an education. He's like, why don't you lead with value? He kind of gave me some coaching in a way, like helped me, but it was from a very condescending, kind of angry tone. So anyway, the call ended. I said, well, do you want to keep talking? He said, no, I don't. You wasted, you burned this bridge. So we finished the call and I went back and listened to the call recording and gone. And sure enough, I said, how are you? I was like, Jeff, I was right. And this is the problem. When you let ego get involved in sales, I kind of wanted to prove Jeff wrong because he had upset me. So then I sent Jeff the recording and said, I didn't say like, hey, Jeff, look, you were wrong, I was right. I was kind of like, hey, Jeff, looks like we got misunderstood there. I went back, checked the call. I did actually say, how are you? Really hoping we can pick this back up because I'm certain we could help you in the X, Y, and Z area. He replied and said, you recorded my call without my permission. I'm in the state of California. It's illegal here and I'm going to sue you and have you fired. On LinkedIn, this whole message. I was awake. I couldn't sleep for a week. He reached out to my boss. Ultimately, he stopped caring eventually. He probably got upset at another salesperson. Never went anywhere, but oh boy, that kept me up at night for a long while. Thinking I was going to lose my job, be sued, all kinds of stuff. So yeah, that was the worst one. Biggest mistake I've made. I think the biggest mistakes I made in sales weren't the sales that I lost. Because there's only one thing worse than losing a sale. It's closing a sale and then losing it. So I think the biggest mistake I've made in sales was selling someone who wasn't a fit, who ended up canceling, which at that point we're talking about, you've celebrated your team. Everyone in Slack's been giving you congratulations and kudos and all the little emojis saying, you made a sale, well, good job. You've been paid the commission, or maybe you're thinking about how you're going to spend that commission. And then you hear from the customer success manager that you handed over to that things weren't going as well as they'd hoped. And then they come back, they cancel because you can't work it out. Your commission gets clawed back. And then there's a question mark over all the sales that you close in the future. Is this really a fit? Can we trust Will's ability to put forward good fit customers to the customer success team? So I feel like those are the biggest mistakes I've made in sales. And one does stick out because it was so big of a sale and it was like the biggest sale in company history. And even though the customer was the one who initiated the sale, they were like, we want to buy, let's get this thing going, let's send the contract over. I should have just stopped, slowed down, and confirmed a few things because it would have been better to disqualify the opportunity, figure out we weren't a fit and we couldn't do what they thought we could do because they had a lot of assumptions, rather than close it and then feel the consequences afterwards. So my biggest mistake was that, closing a deal that shouldn't have been closed, not asking enough questions, and really not confirming fit before I put them through. I've got a lot of value just from following the right people on LinkedIn. Folks like Bilal Petrori, Jen Allen, Challenger, she has a great podcast as well. And a lot of that stems from like these trainers who have this following around them. But outside of that, Sales Hacker is a great resource. They do lots of webinars, they have a bit of community, they have a lot of written resources. JB Sales, also now rebranded as salebetter.xyz, they do almost a webinar a day now. And those webinars have really good guests, sometimes myself, so they're good. And they're on a wide variety of topics from sales development right through to negotiation and closing. So those are probably some of the places that I frequently subscribe to. Outside of that, I'm always a big fan of self-learning. So looking for courses that catch my eye, but also like reading books. You see like every single one of those books is sales focused, read every single one of those. Really seeing how you apply it as well. So like consuming content is great, especially if you're creative, because you need new ideas and perspectives to make sure you're not becoming biased or out of touch. But also like then actually taking it into a sales process and applying it, and then figure out what works for you. You don't have to take everything you read or everything you hear from one person or one community as gospel. It's really about finding what works best for your style of sales, because if you sell out or you start doing things that you don't believe in because you think they're right, you're not really sold on the idea and you're not really committed to it. That's where I think a lot of people get lost in sales, get burnt out and become ultimately unhappy and fail in the career. It's kind of funny because most people who end up in sales end up in it accidentally. But no, it's not behind me. There's a book called The Accidental Salesperson, really good read. So I could have said, oh, I wish I had started doing this sooner. I really started like in sales as soon as I finished university because I had no idea what I wanted to do, and that's what led me here. And I'm really happy with where I'm at. So I wouldn't really change that much about what I had done, the steps I've taken. Even working that scam call center I mentioned, I met my wife. I got really good at being told no in all magnitude of rude ways. So I don't think I would change anything. Now, what I would tell myself to do differently is probably start creating or documenting my journey sooner. So being a content creator now on LinkedIn has opened up my entire life to, one, the opportunity I work at now at SalesFeed, a lot of side income opportunities, and ultimately a hobby that I really enjoy, making and editing videos. So I think I wish I had just told myself to do that sooner, so I could actually be maybe even further ahead where I am now, because I could probably be 3 times as well known and have done 3 times as many kind of events and speaking opportunities and all that stuff. But at the same time, like, it's probably a couple of years down the road for me now as well. So I don't want to say I have any regrets, but I would say start building that network, creating content, finding your voice, and connecting with people. Because I'll tell you what, through creating content, I have met people who have given me way more value than I've never spoken to them. So I would start reaching out to people, start having those conversations with people outside of your company. Your network is so powerful. If you were ever to be laid off or lose your job, then that security is massive. And you see this a lot, especially recently. There's a lot of tech layoffs. There's folks losing their jobs, but because they know 10,000 people or have a following or just really good networkers, they've almost got something lined up already, and that gives you that security net. So that's what I'd probably recommend doing to myself sooner. Creating content, networking, building a professional brand and network.